I wanted to begin this introduction to Cardinal Burke by reading some of Pope Benedict's words at the reopening of the Vatican Library. And this was in November when Pope Benedict said this: "Nothing truly human is foreign to the Church. For this reason she has always sought, gathered, and preserved, with a continuity rarely matched, the best results of the efforts of human beings to rise above the purely material to the conscious or unconscious search for the truth. The search for God intrinsically requires a culture of the Word. The longing for God includes love of the Word, exploration of all its dimensions." And for 30 years, this business has been working to serve the Church in that capacity, not as a library, but gathering books from all over North America and Britain, bringing them here and making them available to scholars, priests, pastors, bookish Catholics, and even cardinals. And so we have Cardinal Burke here today, who has graciously agreed to give some remarks about books. He has been buying books from Loome Theological Booksellers for many years, long before I was here. Month after month, year after year, books leave Stillwater and go to the Cardinal, and now that he's in the Vatican, or Vatican City. And on a previous visit when he was here, I noticed how many books go to him, and I asked him, "When do you read these?" And he told me late at night. So his answer shows that those who are determined to read will find time to read at any time. Dr. Loome, who's the founder of the bookstore, always said we need more bookish bishops. And now I'm happy that we have a very bookish cardinal. So, and then after he gives some of his remarks, there will be time to ask questions if you'd like. So please welcome His Eminence Cardinal Burke.
Well, I'm very pleased to be with you this afternoon, and I thank Christopher for his very gracious introduction. Actually, I have been associated with this bookstore from its very beginning, and I view today in a certain way as paying a debt that I owe to the bookstore, in the sense that it has helped me so much over the years, both as first as a priest and then as a bishop and now as a cardinal. I would like to set my little remarks within the context of a discourse that Pope Benedict XVI, a very famous one he gave to the Roman Curia on the occasion of offering them as Christmas greetings in 2005. And he talked in particular about what had happened with the sacred liturgy after the Second Vatican Ecumenical Council. And he used a very luminous expression which has helped me very much to understand what happened. And he made a distinction between what he called the hermeneutics of discontinuity and the hermeneutics of continuity. And he pointed out that in the sacred liturgy, there can't ever be anything but continuity, because it is the action of Christ from the very beginning of the Church, and that the rite of the Mass, as it was celebrated practically from the time of Pope Gregory the Great until our own time, must necessarily retain all its beauty and all of its attractiveness to us. But what happened was that a mentality set in after the Second Vatican Ecumenical Council that somehow the Church was being reconstituted anew, and that the Church now, in our time after the Council, would have nothing to do with what had gone before. And there was even this kind of romantic idea about returning to the very first centuries of the Church and living the Church in its purity, as if there had been something fundamentally corrupt that had happened in all of those centuries until our own. And the Holy Father pointed out the fallacy of this, and then indicated the reason for his own great interest in the sacred liturgy and what he was doing to maintain an appreciation of the rite of the Mass as it had been celebrated up until the reforms of the Council, without in any way calling into question the Council itself. Well, what also happened after the Second Vatican Ecumenical Council, and I think it's also is this mentality of that somehow we're doing everything new and we're doing everything better, and all of this living of the Catholic faith, of which, by the way, we are the heirs, was all somehow wrong, and it also influenced the libraries. And I remember my first visits with Dr. Loome, I'd see these beautiful books that were being abandoned by dioceses, diocesan libraries, religious houses, seminaries, and I'm talking about the fundamental works and collections which we need to study in order to understand our faith as it's been handed on to us down the centuries. And so from the very beginning, I had an insight into this. I suppose I am one of those bookish Catholics, but I was blessed, and tonight I'll make a little reflection on it, to have received a wonderful education in the Catholic schools. And we were taught to respect very much books, and even though these were relatively poor Catholic schools, they each had a library, and the library was a very special place, and you learned to respect books, and rightly so. Then in my years in the seminary and so forth, and the study of especially of philosophy and theology, to come to a deep appreciation of the sources, and to be able to actually to consult them, to find these volumes in which the writings of the fathers of the church or the great theologians are contained, was for me always an adventure and also an inspiration. And so I want to, first of all, express a deep appreciation to Dr. Loome, but also now to Christopher Hagan and Andrew Poole, who are continuing on this work. And as you can imagine, living in the kind of culture in which we live, in which unfortunately too much of it was imbibed also in the church, this kind of endeavor is a challenge to continue this work. And yet I don't know how many such bookstores there are, but I have not found one better than Loome Theological Booksellers, and so it's very important that this continue, and I'm grateful to these young bookish Catholics who are willing to take on those great challenges. What in particular has benefited me and I buy a lot of books, have bought, I'm sorry, I'm not one of the biggest customers, but from Loome Theological Booksellers, just a couple of little reflections about one of the great gifts to me here has been the lives of the saints. This was something that I grew up with and was very much stressed in the Catholic schools that I attended. And for me, it's been a key part of my own spiritual life over the years. And I have just been so pleased to find some of the classic biographies of the saints here. And this has been always a special section of the bookstore. And I continue to have a nice little collection now of my own, mostly all of them from Loome's. And I really recommend that to anyone. In terms of your own purchase of books, we learn so much from those who have gone before us about how to live in Christ in our own lives, and that for me has been a tremendous enrichment. Beyond that, and I hadn't thought about it at the time in terms of hermeneutics of discontinuity and continuity, but I, for instance, when I was in theology before I was ordained, the professor we had for moral theology taught us exclusively a very erroneous form of moral theology, which is called proportionalism, and he was rather convinced, and so we didn't learn anything else. I had grown up with a very strong sense of what is right and what is wrong, and I simply never could accept this notion that there that things that are wrong in themselves could ever be right because I had some good intention or there was some good consequence in view. And so I needed, after those courses, to educate myself in moral theology, and I found here a number of the classic texts to read, and I've used them not only for my own knowledge, which I needed it very much, first of all as a Catholic, but even more so as a priest, to be a teacher of others. But in addition to that, these texts and so forth were an inspiration to me, deepening my own Christian life, and so that's something you'll find here. For instance, those classic texts, and many times I've been just amazed to find them. And then one other little category, and then I'll stop because I don't want to go on too long. We have some time for questions, and you won't mistake the fact that I'm very enthusiastic about the bookstore. And actually, when I was already coming to Stillwater, and that has to do with looms too, because as I was saying to Father Miller, the invitation, he picked the right person to invite me to come here, was from Dr. Loome. And first of all, I wrote a letter that was so articulate and pleaded the case so strongly. But secondly, I have such a long and a very close relationship with him that I could hardly say no. But I was happy then to be able to coordinate this little visit here too. But the third thing I would mention is in terms of my own studies of canon law, and here too, to return to that theme of continuity and discontinuity, the same thing happened in terms of the church's discipline. There was this kind of euphoria after the council that this was now the church of freedom and love, and what in the world would you need with laws and discipline of this very negative, and this was all seen to be also retrograde. And what happened in the process were the sad witnesses of what happens when you don't pay attention to discipline and so forth. You end up with great scandals, because the church is always made up of sinners, and we as sinners, we need a law, we need discipline, and we also to get along with one another, and at the same time to foster our own Christian life and to build up the life of the community. But anyway, here I found so many wonderful texts in canon law, the classic texts, and was able to purchase my own volumes in order to be able to study them in greater depth. And that also has been a great enrichment to me. Well, with that, I will conclude simply to say that I am grateful for your presence here this afternoon, and I take it that you are all bookish Catholics or non-Catholics perhaps too, and strong supporters of Looms. But I simply want you to know that I'm grateful to have an ongoing relationship with Looms, and the books can even arrive in Rome from here, even as you've gone across the sea to bring some of these wonderful books here so that they could be at our disposition. And one final thing too, then this has always made a deep impression on me. Many new institutes, also in the mission countries and so forth, new seminaries, new religious communities, it's only thanks to this Booksellers that they're able to put together an essential library for the seminary or for the religious congregation, also for some new universities, because you can't find these books that were discarded but are very important for a good church library. And I don't even like to think of how many wonderful books have gone to the dumpster, out, simply to put it plainly, out of ignorance. When I became Bishop of La Crosse, I discovered that many of the older priests had very fine libraries. That's the way they were raised and they'd have. And I discovered that in many cases when the priest died, that their books were just being hauled to the dumpster. It was that whole period where anything that was published before 1968 somehow probably wasn't worth anything. So thanks be to God that, and then we started a relationship with Dr. Loome, that he would come down and go through each of their libraries to retrieve the most valuable books.